Last episode, we said the database should enforce isolation instead of trusting every query. But there is a decision underneath that one, and it constrains everything you build afterwards. Do your tenants share a database at all? Give every customer their own, and isolation is almost free because there is no shared table to leak from. It is also the answer that quietly stops being affordable, and the moment you find out is usually the moment you cannot easily change it. So this episode is the trade, stated honestly: silo, pool, and bridge, what each one actually costs you, and why the right answer for most platforms is not one of the three. Here they are. Silo is a database per tenant. Nothing is shared, so a query physically cannot reach another customer's data, and you can restore one customer to Tuesday without touching anyone else. Pool is the opposite. One database, one set of tables, every tenant's rows side by side with a tenant ID column. It is the cheapest thing per customer and the easiest to operate, and it is the one that leaks. Bridge sits in between. One database, but a schema per tenant, so the tables are separate while the server is shared. Each of these is a completely reasonable choice. What matters is being clear-eyed about what you are buying, because you are paying for it either way. Now the honest comparison on the axes that decide it. Blast radius. In a pool, one bad query or one bad deploy can affect every customer at once. In a silo, it affects one. Cost per tenant. Pooling shares fixed overhead across everyone. So a small customer costs you almost nothing, while a silo pays for a whole database whether that customer uses it or not. Operations. Migrating one schema is a task, and migrating thousands of them is a project, which is episode 6. And then per-tenant restore, which people forget until they need it. In a silo, restoring one customer is a normal restore. In a pool, it means surgically extracting one tenant's rows from a backup of everybody, live, without breaking references. That difference is worth thinking about before you need it at 3 a.m. Which is why most platforms that survive do not pick one. They tier. The long tail of self-serve customers, thousands of them paying a small amount each, goes in the pool, because that is the only place the economics work. The handful of enterprise customers who pay real money and whose contract has a clause about data residency get a silo because they are paying for exactly that. And the interesting part is that this is not a compromise, it is the product. The isolation model becomes something you sell. Dedicated infrastructure stops being an engineering detail and becomes a line item on the enterprise tier. The mistake is not choosing pool or choosing silo. The mistake is building one, discovering you need the other for a single deal, and finding out the tenancy assumption is welded into every query you own. So how do you actually choose? Start from the constraint you cannot engineer around, which is usually a contract. If a customer's regulator requires their data in a specific country or physically separate, that is a silo, and no amount of clever filtering changes it. Then look at your own numbers. If the smallest customer worth having cannot pay for a database, the long tail is pooled, and that is arithmetic, not preference. And then the part that actually matters. Whichever you pick, keep the tenancy decision behind a boundary in your code, so that resolving where a tenant's data lives is one component and not an assumption baked into 400 queries. Because the thing that kills platforms is not picking wrong. It is picking, being unable to change, and meeting a customer worth changing for. For the rest of this series, we build the hard one, the pool, because it is where the money is and where the danger is. Which brings us straight back to episode 1's problem, shared tables, and a promise that no query can cross a tenant. Next episode, row-level security, and making Postgres itself refuse. See you there.